My friend Jill has created shoes I wish I had when my kids were littles. Kiss and Toe shoes are not only stylish and practical, but each pair is designed to help your kids put their shoe on the right foot all by themselves. All they have to do is make sure the adorable woodland foxes embroidered on each shoe are kissing when the shoes meet. These shoes save time, they teach independence, and they cultivate self-confidence in kids. Not only that, but with every pair sold, Kiss and Toes donates a portion of their proceeds to support families who are in the process of adoption. This is a product and a company that Hey Girl is honored to support. From now until Christmas Day, you can get 15% off your purchase from Kiss and Toes by using the promo code HeyGirlPod at checkout. 15% off, y'all. That is the biggest discount they've offered since their launch. So what are you waiting for? Go to kissandtoes.com. That's KISSINTOES.com. Kissandtoes.com. Make sure you use the promo code HeyGirlPod. Get your 15% off. Go order some of these adorable shoes. Shoes for your neighbors, shoes for your nieces and nephews, shoes for all of the kids. And don't forget to use the promo code HeyGirlPod and get your 15% off. Hey girls, and welcome to season 4 of the Hey Girl podcast. I'm your host, Bethany Needham. This season, we get to hear stories of faithfulness from stay-at-home mamas, business entrepreneurs, some amazing single ladies, your dearest friends, and your favorite authors. We hope these stories will continue to encourage you to run your race in your place. For more information and to connect with us, go find us on Instagram and Facebook. We're at HeyGirlPod, or you can join our email list through my website, BethanyNeedham.com. As always, thanks for listening. If it weren't for you, I would literally be a crazy person talking to myself in a microphone. But thanks to your listening and sharing this podcast, I get to be a crazy person talking to you through a microphone. So grab a cup of coffee or a cold can of seltzer and let's get this episode started. Hey girls, and welcome back to another week of the Hey Girl podcast. This week, you get to meet my friend, Erin Burr. Erin and I actually went to Bible school together at New Brunswick Bible Institute almost 20 years ago. And I realized as we sat down to do this interview that I have not seen Erin since Bible school. So it was like crazy reunion time, and it was so special that she made the drive from Maine to come visit me in New Hampshire so we could do this interview face to face. And oh my goodness, her story. It is incredible. There's just so much to it. I cannot wait to share it with you. But before we jump in, real quick, I wanted to take a moment and share a review that came in this week. ArtGirl8413, or whatever your real name is, I just want to thank you for leaving a review. This is what she said. I absolutely love this podcast and all of the amazing ladies who share their stories and hearts for Jesus here. I'm inspired every time I listen and encouraged to be bold for our awesome God. I need that encouragement. Thank you for being so real, so positive, and so on fire for Jesus. God bless y'all. Lots of love from Texas. First of all, I love a review with y'all in it. And from Texas, oh my goodness. Thank you so much for taking the time to leave a review. I love that you're listening from Texas. I'm hoping to get back there someday soon. My brother and sister-in-law live there with my nephews. So Texas holds a special place in my heart. But we really are so grateful for you leaving the review, for just the encouragement. And so if you haven't left one yet, this is your reminder to take the time, go on iTunes, leave a review. It's so helpful for us as we grow as a podcast, as we reach more people with these stories. It really does just mean a lot. Okay, I hope you're ready. I would definitely encourage you to grab some tissues because Erin's story is so powerful and so moving. I cannot wait for you to hear it. I will say, for those of you who may listen with younger ears in the car, minivan, whatever, we are going to cover some issues that may be sensitive for younger ones, from drugs, abuse, different things. And so this is your fair warning to pop in those AirPods, earbuds, or maybe wait till you're folding laundry and the kids are taking a nap. I cannot wait for you to hear this though, and can't wait to hear from you just how God speaks to you through this episode. So without further ado, let me introduce you to my friend, Erin Burr. Welcome to the show, Erin.
Hi.
So excited that you're here.
Me too.
All right, so I got to give a little background on this one because you are somebody that I've technically known for a lot of years.
Yes.
But I should have done math before I came on here. So I've been married 17 years, it'd be 18, 19 years ago.
Yeah.
I was 17 years old and attended New Brunswick Bible Institute, which feels like a lifetime ago. And you were also at the Bible school. So I went 1 year. I don't know if you continued your story. You can share in your story. But I do know that I have not actually seen you since, have I?
I don't think so.
Graduated.
Although you look exactly the same.
I do. Erin, forget Shauna Stevens. You're my new best friend.
Love Shauna, though.
Sorry, Shauna. That's so funny. Yes. So we went to Bible school together. Peace out. My memories are so very foggy. I mean, it was so long ago. Mm-hmm. I remember borrowing clothes from you. I was like reminiscing this morning. I was talking to my son about, I have this, like, the girl coming to the interview. I went to Bible school with her. I was like, I remember I borrowed clothes from her because she had like really nice clothes. And that's the extent of my memories. So awesome. Thanks for that, by the way.
What an impact I made.
It was, because if I was dressing myself, I probably would have gone down a whole nother path. Aww. It was a bad time. It was a bad time. Yeah, it just like blows my mind that we get to sit here. But we're going to take some time, and I feel like this is like almost a live catch up for even for me to know kind of what does this journey look like for you. So let's start with introduction. People who've never met you before. Erin, tell us just a little bit about yourself.
So I'm on my second marriage, but that's okay because God gives us grace, right? I've been married for 7.5 years and have 4 kids. One's going to be 14 next week. One's going to be 11 in November. One just turned 7 in September. So I have 3 fall babies. And then my daughter's 4. She turned 4 in June. And we live in Gorham, Maine. And we are the Celebrate Recovery pastors at our church. We both met at Celebrate Recovery. So it's definitely, we can see God working through our lives to be a part of that ministry. Yeah, we are busy with sports. My husband's building a treehouse right now. It's pretty massive. We should be on the show Treehouse Masters. He's pretty talented that way. And I stay home. So, yeah.
You just got me a Treehouse Masters. You're building a massive treehouse on your property?
He is. I'm not.
Is there going to be before and after photos?
Yes, he's made a whole album. So we'll be sharing that. Stay tuned.
I'm pretty excited about this. We all need to follow her now so we can see the final product. Okay, so obviously this is where you're at in life right now. I know you from way back in the day, back in Bible school, before either of us were married. So a lot has happened in life. Let's start with, I would think, for all of us, the most important moment in our life is, when did you really start your relationship with Jesus, and what did that look like?
Well, I grew up with God in my life, in church, my whole life. And obviously at MBBI, you're in this environment where that's all you're doing. However, when you get out in real life and life happens and disappointments happen, you kind of lose that momentum of being with God and walking with God. So really my surrender moment is what I call it, because I do feel like I had God in my life since I was really young, like 6. But my real surrender moment, like, okay, God, I really want to walk with you and do this right, was November 2011, which is almost 8 years ago. So that was my moment. I was in a really bad relationship and there was a lot of domestic violence that night. And I'll just say I'm lucky to be alive. But that was my night of surrender. Like, I can't do one foot in this relationship, in this lifestyle, and the other foot going to church and saying I'm a Christian. So that was really a big turning point for me. And I was connected at Life Church at that time. So I was able to really plug in and grow in my relationship with God from there.
I love your description because when I asked that question, right, your relationship starts with Jesus, everybody kind of has different language and different ways that they can say that. But I always think ultimately when we think about that real relationship starting, surrender is kind of this key word, whether we speak it or not, is really what we're saying, is that moment of true, God, I can't do this without you. And some of us need to get to darker and lower places. And I'm saying that to myself before we're ready to surrender. Others, I feel like at 4 years old are just, they're there and it's incredible. So to hear you talk about this full surrender. So I don't know how comfortable you are talking around that season, but you touched on something obviously very heavy, which is domestic violence. It is not something we've talked a lot about on this podcast, somewhat because it's a sensitive subject. There's obviously people more than just ourselves involved in it, but maybe as much as you're comfortable, talk to me a little bit about, because that season really is what brought you to surrender, but what did that look like and how did God reach you in a place of what I'm assuming is a very scary and dark place?
I feel like I had lost touch with myself due to other circumstances in my life. I went through a divorce and so on. And then I just got into this relationship with somebody that, was just hard to both do the Christian life. So instead, usually one person gets swayed either way. And I allowed myself to go into the dark places, and I didn't have much self-worth to begin with. So when your self-worth is low, that's the life you live is, so that's kind of where I was at. And I really just wanted to fix somebody and help somebody, but I have learned that you can't fix anybody but yourself. I allowed myself to go dark in these dark places with him, and it was just a really hard time. And I was trying to co-parent, and I wasn't the best co-parent with my kid's father that I should have been at the time either, but I somehow got through it. And I know that was God. His grace got me through it. I always knew in the back of my head that it wasn't right. I shouldn't be in this place. I knew better, but I thought I was in love. And when you think you're in love, a lot of women will bend over backwards and do whatever it takes when really they're just scared of being alone. And so I think the bottom line was I was scared to be alone and didn't feel like I could, quote unquote, have the knight in shining armor that I always wanted. So I just was okay with settling for what I knew wasn't right and what went against who I was in my morals. But at the same time, when you develop care for somebody, you just kind of allow yourself to get swept away. And so it was a very dark time. I tried drugs. I was, just in these back and forth fights, and God was far away in my life. As much as I thought maybe I was trying to be a good Christian, God was far away. I was far away from God, I should say. God never is far away. I was far away from God. I just, when you're not living in the walk that God has for us, we're obviously going to go somewhere. There's only two ways to go. So God was talking to me all throughout. There's a lot of different wake-up calls, quote unquote, that I had that I ignored. I know there was a lot of people in my life that were concerned for me, and I ignored that. And I just... Because
you just... clarifying, even in my own mind, first of all, you did have Christian community.
Yes.
This isn't like before I came to God, this is a whole because I think sometimes we play out these things and we're like, before Jesus, after Jesus.
Yeah,
like
no.
And not only that, but I'm putting these pieces in my, you have been married already and walked through a divorce.
Yes.
That was during the time that you were still in Christian. This is like,
Yes.
we've already gone to Bible school together.
Yeah.
So you literally went to Bible school. Yeah. So not to rewind too far, but I just think this is such an important thing for young women, any age women, to hear. And I'm going to go all the way back. You and I were in Bible school together. Mm-hmm. I would venture to guess, even though we weren't super close, that we probably had a lot of the same dreams, ideas of our lives. Mm-hmm. You were dating somebody while you're in Bible school. So I was the same, right? Yep. I'm dating in Bible school. At this point, you kind of have this, like, you get married, and not to say that just, this is kind of where I was like, this is the route. There had to be a point, I'm basing this on the story you say, there had to be this point where all of a sudden this reckoning came of, this is not playing out the way. And so you walked through what I think is one of the most difficult things in Christian community, which first you walk through divorce. Mm-hmm. And we have talked about this on previous episodes of Christian women. When you are already in Christian community and you're walking through something that I still think we wrestle as a church and as a people group, like Christians wrestle to know, how do you walk with someone through this thing? And it can be from personal conviction. It can be from understanding or misunderstanding of scripture. But let's go to that moment first, because I think it kind of builds to who you were even when you entered this abusive relationship. Mm-hmm. How did you walk that journey, and how did God show up for you even in that? But even the flip side, what areas did you feel like people didn't show up the way that you wish that they had, and it wasn't helpful?
Mm-hmm. I got married the first time I was newly 21, newly out of Bible school, and had never really experienced life on my own. And you have these expectations, especially when you're in a Bible school setting where everybody's getting married and relationships is definitely a focus.
The MRS degree, is that what the joke is? Ring by spring or your money back.
Yeah, that was pretty much what I did. And not that was wrong or anything. It's just, I didn't allow myself to grow and learn who I was. And I was already struggling with self-worth anyways. Going from guy to guy to guy was kind of a coping mechanism for me, and just getting my validation and self-worth out of that instead of out of God. So that was my first thing that I probably should have done a little bit differently. But, I don't have the regrets or the what ifs or anything like that. I'm grateful for that time in my life. I have 2 beautiful kids, and I just want to clarify that we do co-parent very well. We have forgiven each other. All of that is water under the bridge. It's a beautiful thing, really. But, when affairs happen, which is exactly what happened, him and myself, we both are to blame. And when we don't take responsibility and seek out the tools to really get better and work on ourselves individually and together, Satan shows up, and it's easier to throw your hands up. And to be honest, I was the one that said, I don't want to do this anymore. But I also had these other negative influences, one being a relationship on the side. So, when you're just not walking with God and doing things right, you get in your own mind and you think you know it better, and you don't. And I had a lot of good Christian community. I was a part of an amazing church. My kids' grandparents, his parents, still my family today, still amazing people. They walked beside me the whole entire time and just showed grace and forgiveness the whole entire everything. And I made some real doozy decisions, and they were there, and still to this day we have a good relationship. But there was that flip side of feeling abandoned, of feeling like, and I think it's just the way I grew up. You just don't get divorced. You just don't talk about it. You just push through it. And yes, should you? Absolutely. But 2 people have to be 100% committed to that. And I can't overly speak for him, but I know that both of us probably weren't in a place in our lives where we were willing to do that. I see, though, that path and that incident and all of that pain and all of that hurt has brought me where I am today, that I can talk to people and I can talk to women and I can walk beside them. And even when I do marriage counseling, I don't feel like I need to say, just go get a divorce. It worked for me. As even though, yes, did my outcome work? And am I in a beautiful life today? Yes. But maybe God would have worked things differently, and if I had actually listened and gotten some different help than just throwing my hands up in the air. So, God restores, and he, is a God of second, third, and fourth, fifth, whatever chances. But I think a lesson for me was, working 100%, committing your life to God in whatever situation you're going through. It's always going to turn out good, and restoration can happen. And so, it was a hard road, but it has really been okay. Like, now it's okay. Now, we're forgiven and we co-parent. And
isn't that beautiful?
He went to Bible school too. So we're both Christians, and we both do want to do what's right for our kids and raise them in God. So, as much of a regret as I have, I don't have regret. It's a weird thing. You don't wish that on anybody, but yet you see God, how he works, and where I am today because of it. So
isn't that, I feel like you're describing, though, that's what scripture talks about, Romans 8:28, like God will work things together for good to those who love him. And I don't think any of us, when we look back at things that God has redeemed, would necessarily choose the original, broken piece that he has now redeemed. But I don't think that and this is where I think we get confused. Like, I think actually those of us who have walked these kind of roads and we live in guilt or regret, or that we're actually allowing the enemy to win a battle to keep us from the freedom that God's called us to. Like, my husband said this to me. We had this conversation laying in bed last night, and I have had this thing like in the back of my mind that has been eating me alive. And heck, we're being real, so I'm going to say it out loud and the whole world can. I've very openly talked about mental illness to the point that it's becoming kind of a funny thing. Like, people are like, hey, we're doing this thing on mental illness. Will you be a part? And I laugh because I'm like, of course, this would end up being like this platform that nobody wants to choose. Like, absolutely, I would love to come talk about how crazy I am. But I'm laying there in bed, and I said to my husband that I've had this guilt inside of me because I've not taken my medication for months. I mean, insane amount of months, right? And saying it out loud, like, I've literally been afraid to say it out loud for the tongue lashing I half expected to come my way. And this is my husband. He's literally the best man. Like, looks at me, he's like, okay, well, that's behind. There's literally nothing you can do about it. Like, you didn't do it. So do you need to go back on it? Like, let's have that conversation. And I couldn't, like, I literally, the wrestling in my brain was like, well, no, we can't just move forward because I have been screwing this up for a long time. Like, this is an ordeal. He's like, well, it's only an ordeal if you make it an ordeal.
Very true.
And he started questioning, like, why are you holding on to this? And I was like, babe. And I almost was like trying to make him angry at me because I'm like, no, I need more of something here. Because I was like, no, like, my doctor has handed me paper prescriptions that I have sitting because I've just never filled it. I have been afraid to talk out loud about mental illness because I've been afraid to admit to people, like, yeah, I'm a big believer in medication, and I stopped taking mine because of nothing other than like laziness. And I'm like, I'm done with this. And I was like, and that was a really long time ago, and I haven't done anything about it. And but here's what you're saying, right? Like, exactly what my husband said, would you ever tell someone, like, get divorced, that'll fix it? No. But God has absolutely redeemed your story, and what he's called you to is to, like, okay, great, all of that's behind you. I've forgiven, I've redeemed. So look at what's in front of you. Look at what, like, and this is the life that you're in. And how do you actually live that freely without the guilt and the shame, without even, I think people are afraid of undermining sin or poor decisions. like we almost feel like we have to pay the price for it. Like we forget the whole message of the gospel. That Jesus is like, I already did that. Part. Literally, like he's like, are you literally wasting my sacrifice because now you suddenly feel like you need to sacrifice for it? And as human beings, sometimes, and I don't know what this is, I haven't totally dug into my own heart on this. Sometimes it's like we want to crucify other people for their decisions. Like, oh, I'm not letting you off the, like, you better at least pay for it. Otherwise, what, we're all just going to go running around. Like, this is a terrible way to say it. But when people I feel like we feel this way about divorce. Like, oh, what, now everybody's going to go get divorced because no, it's not the story. But what the beautiful story is those who have walked through that, like you and everything that you're sharing, even the redemption in your family and co-parenting in your kids, is that even the things that feel hopeless or lost or somehow were once on a list of things you never ever should do, that even there God can meet and redeem and restore. I think it's so powerful. So you obviously went through marriage, you walked through divorce, entered a very dangerous and scary. I would love for just a moment, and I've talked with friends about this before, but I think all of us have that place, that thing in our minds that like, well, we would never do this. And you mentioned like drug use, abuse, these things. I can imagine listeners who are like, well, I mean, I'd never do that. But I also know you well enough to know that in Bible school, we weren't sitting around and you'd be like, I feel like one day I'm probably going to do drugs and, you know, end up with an abusive guy. Like nobody says that. It's always the thing we'll never do. Yeah. Looking back, because you have this hindsight now, what do you feel like if you could talk to somebody who maybe is starting to make that? Because here's what we know. We walk into sin, right? We don't just we're jumping in full. It's usually inch by inch. They're kind of at that beginning. Well, I'd never do that, but here I am. What were the things that you look back and see now? Like, okay, now I see where I took a step and I shouldn't have taken a step. And what maybe did that look like before you were all the way there, that kind of little by little?
Yeah, I mean, big sin only happens when you start getting 1 degree off. It's like you said, you don't just, one day I'm just going to wake up and do that crappy thing today. Like you don't do that. You really get 1 degree off, 1 degree off in whatever it is in your life, especially when your relationship with God is suffering. So yeah, I think there was some things. Well, number one, our relationship started when I wasn't fully divorced yet. So that was obviously a big red flag, and I ignored that. Then there was just my kids, like seeing them, you know, not really happy and fighting me a little bit to be in that same place with this person. Those were some red flags. Meeting some people in parking lots to get some drugs, not necessarily for me, but just with my kids there, it just, you know, so all these little things, allowing somebody to call me a name that I would have never imagined what I would have been called, and then still like justifying myself or justifying that, oh yeah, okay, I guess it was my fault. Like those kinds of things, all of those I saw that wasn't healthy behavior. I saw myself not eating all day because I was doing things for everybody else because I felt like I had to, instead of taking care of myself first. So all of those things were definitely 1 degree off, 1 degree off, 1 degree off, and to get me to where I am. So
talking through that 1 degree, I think it's even just powerful, the things that you listed that could be for different people all over the map. Like the fact that you were like, some of it's just letting someone call you a name, like letting somebody have, you know, say things or whatever to you that you're like, I would never. And in that same list was picking up drugs that I wasn't doing. Because even how you word, that's so how my brain works. I always have that justified thought in my head. Well, but I'm not this. Right. I'm almost like that should be our red flag. If we have to tag what we're doing with but at least I'm not. Right. Then you basically just named your next step.
Yeah. No kidding. Yeah, because it was my next step.
Yeah,
really,
it's not as far as you think it is, right?
I ended up going further with that. So, yeah.
Obviously, a lot of these small decisions, we kind of talked about where that led in this relationship, but then you talked about this place of surrender. Talk to me a little bit about what did that, like the surroundings of that, how did God get your attention to the place where you were really ready to say, okay, enough? Because you said it earlier, and I always think it's a beautiful reminder that God is never far from us. And I'm an image person, so I always have that image of when I feel furthest from God, I just have my back to him. And God is literally right behind me, like, just turn around. Turn around. So what was that for you, that turnaround? Like, how did God finally, because you said you had community, people were speaking into it, but what was the breaking point?
Yeah, I was going to Life Church for 6 months and developed some relationships and community there. Celebrate Recovery had started a month before that moment in my life where I had surrender. So I was already starting to get the community I needed, to have the support I needed. Almost like God knew I was going to have this moment, and he built that bridge for me. What happened was that night that I had the surrender, the guy I was with, he destroyed my apartment and obviously was abusive, and the police came. And so when I think it was in the night, like midnight, 1, I was in my apartment. My kids fortunately were with their dad, so they weren't a part of this at all. Thank goodness. Like, obviously God knew. And it was pitch dark in my apartment. I didn't have the lights on. Everything was destroyed. The police just left. And I was just thinking, like, my life flashed before my eyes that night, and my kids. And I just remember thinking, God, if I do this continue, there will be no more life, or my kids will get taken away. All these moments flash through my head, and just sitting helpless in that mess of an apartment in the dark by myself. I knew God was definitely very evident and real to me that night. And I knew better. And it's not like I didn't know God and, oh, there's God. No, I knew better this whole entire time. But I was at a rock bottom where I was vulnerable and allowed myself to feel God again and respond to him again. And so, was I perfect after that? Nope. But that was my starting point of, I'm done. I'm done living this lifestyle. I'm done turning my back to you. I'm just done. So, the picture is a dark, empty apartment that is completely destroyed, and a body that ached internally, mentally, emotionally, physically, all of it. So that's where God reached me.
You said something too that I think is so powerful to us to remember. Those of us who are maybe walking with friends, or maybe have developed a new relationship where somebody is not fully surrendered to God, that our go-to sometimes is we want that moment for them to be surrendered, and then kind of, okay, now you're part of this community, like especially in churches and things. But I thought how you described that is more often actually how it happens, which is people show up in our communities who are a mess and who are not ready to turn and are just, but God is using, like, no, I'm going to build their community first. Yeah. And this is in my time, like I'm laying out. But for those of us, and I'm speaking to the people that surrounded you, and for those of us who are the ones surrounding, is that required people to embrace you where you are at when you showed up, not just embrace you when you were broken and like, okay, I'm ready. And then you went on to say, which is also true, even after that, to continue to walk with you because it's messy. Like, it's not this like, ta-da, no, I'm better. Like, you don't walk from the same way that you inched your way into, degree by degree. That's often, honestly, that's sanctification, right? That's the journey for the rest of our lives with Jesus, is him now making these adjustments and us daily surrendering inch by inch those parts of us. But I love that you have so many examples in your story of people who did this well, who became your community when you weren't in a good place, who stayed, your family, everyone that you described from earlier on, who stayed with you. I can't imagine how hard it was for them to be looking on, being like, Erin, what are you doing?
Oh, I know it was hard for them.
But the choice to, nope, we're still here.
Yeah.
We're still here. We're not going anywhere. Girl, all of that, knowing all of that, like here and now, okay, you're married again. So you obviously were doing Celebrate Recovery. We know it was a messy journey, but talk me through meeting your husband now, what that journey looked like.
Well, that journey was fast. Like I said, I surrendered. However, I wasn't perfect. So one of the crutches in my life or the coping mechanisms I said earlier was guys, right? So when I was in this moment of despair and this moment of surrender, one of the things I still reached out for was a guy for validation. Like I still wasn't there. Just because you surrender doesn't mean you've arrived, right? We'll never arrive. And so I had met Matt a couple of weeks before that. He friended me on Facebook and started liking every single post. And I was like, oh, okay. Like I kind of was like into it a little bit, but I still was dealing with this other relationship and trying to figure that all out. So I reached out to him. He was the first person after all of that mess that I reached out to. And I had a lot of community, a lot of women I could have reached out to, but I chose him. And that's just in my own, needing that guy validation. So, while that may not have been the number one thing I should have done, God worked that out for good. And him and I both were in Celebrate Recovery. I did not know his story. I did not know anything about him. I ended up finding out, obviously, he was 5 months sober from drugs and alcohol when I met him. And I remember thinking like, oh my gosh, another person that's struggling with drugs and alcohol. I don't know if I want this relationship. Just because of my experience in the past, sobriety, not sober, not sober, like that whole game. It's just, but I could see something was different. I could see God in him. He was raising his hands in worship at church and at CR. He was plugging in. And I just saw a difference, and I saw God in him. And I could tell that he was really doing what he needed to do to get healthy. And that was his number one priority. And he told me that. He's like, I do a lot of meetings, and that is what comes first right now. That is my lifeline right now, church and meetings for recovery. So, just meeting him and knowing all of that and just walking this journey with him, it was really fast because as much as we tried to not go down a road of physical affection, we did. And I got pregnant a month after knowing him. So that was tough for me. I called him at work. I said, you need to go somewhere private, somewhere to sit down. He's like, okay, what? And I told him. And he came right back to my apartment and he was glowing with happiness. And I was in a different place. I had just got out of this other relationship. I had just had all of this happen. I was trying to surrender my life to God. I felt like a failure. I'm like, oh, here I am, God. Oh, but wait, now I made this mistake. But my child is not a mistake. And that moment, those moments were maybe backwards, but they weren't a mistake. Like God restored them. God used all of that to help us again reach other people and talk to other people, and it brought us closer. And we have a pastor in our church who passed away a couple years ago of cancer, but he was the pastor that embraced us. They all did. Matt went and told all of them. We had 3-4 pastors. He went and told them all, like confessed almost in a way, like, shoot, this is what I did. But you know what? They embraced it. They literally said, one of them took me into her office and said, well, what's done is done. What are you going to do now? Like, what's your next step?
Her and my husband been meeting about advice.
Like, let's move forward. What's your next step? And so we started marriage counseling and we got married, and the person that married us was just a very huge part of our lives as starting to get married and in our first couple years of marriage. So, just we had that community, and God got us through. Not once did we feel like we were cast aside, not once. And it helped us grow. We got married, we moved to a house all very fast within 6 months. And, one of the funny things that I can't say now because we've been almost married almost 8 years, but when we first got married and stuff, I was like, whatever, dude, you don't know me. Because we really didn't know each other. We knew each other for like 4 months and we got married.
Such a great.
So he would say
you don't
something.
Even know me like that.
Yeah, whatever, dude, you don't know me. Like I would say that jokingly. I can't say that now. I wish I could still. But that was just a joke we had. But God worked all of that out. And it's just so crazy to see his hand in all of it. And one of the big things is we both started praying together and doing devotionals together. And I had never been in a relationship where that happened. So for him to initiate that and say, hey, let's pray together. Hey, let's read together. That was like a big aha moment for me. Like, okay, he really wants God in the center of this. And, so we just kept doing the next right thing and the next right thing. And God, that's where we are today. 8 years later.
Girl. I get all the feels right now. I love redemption stories. I'm sitting here thinking like there is nothing more beautiful than not just a redemptive story, but one that somebody is embracing and living out. And I just think it's absolutely beautiful. And just all of the pieces to this. I love that you said like children are never a mistake. Like sex before marriage is a sin in terms of scripture where, it sounds harsh, but children, like babies aren't mistakes. That's not how that plays out. And even in the relationship, even if a baby didn't come out of it, like God redeems, he longs to redeem these things in our life. But there's the piece which you've said again and again, God's redemption came when you place those things at his feet. Like, God, here it is. Like, I'm not making excuses. Like you even said I could point, I could blame, but like, here's the decisions I made, but God, I'm giving it to you because you redeemed, like you can restore this. And I'm looking at you now and you got this beautiful girl that's now chilling with my daughter up in her room, watching Netflix or something. I don't even know. And I think, gosh, God writes the best stories.
He does.
That every single one of us are invited into. That's the other thing that I think is like, you're speaking to my heart, because the thing that probably I wrestle with the most myself and then watching other people is when you see a story that you're like, they just feel like is beyond redemption. You're like, no, like nothing's beyond redemption. That's exactly what the enemy wants you to think. But then again, the other side of that coin is there's nothing more beautiful and inspiring to me than watching somebody walk out a redemptive story. And this is where you're at. Like so we talked Treehouse Master, you've been married, you got 4 kids, correct? Tell me then this, because redemptive stories, let's be clear, are not perfect. No. And that's not even in terms of mistakes. I know we've mentioned it a lot in terms of, hey, I made mistakes along the way. But I'm saying redemptive stories aren't even perfect in terms of, even when we're making all the right decisions, it's hard and it's a broken world, broken system. Like you don't go into sobriety and drugs and alcohol disappear from the world and they no longer exist and whatever. You don't wrestle with self-worth and then all of a sudden, like, I've never had a second thought. Like, sometimes redemption works that way, but for the most part, I can say of my own story and pretty much anyone I've spoken to, even beautiful stories are hard. They're every single day. You are still in a place of having to, okay, what is the next right thing? So what does that look like today for you? Like, what is the journey looking like just day to day? Hey, we've heard what's led up to this, but this is what it looks like right now in my life.
Yeah. Our life, we are very blessed. We really I feel like I have to tell people, like, especially that know us or coming into recovery or going to church, like, oh, Maddie and Erin, they're so great. It's like, yeah, but we had to do a lot of work individually to get where we are. And it doesn't mean that we've arrived. Like I've said before, you don't ever arrive. I struggle with anxiety. I struggle with self-worth. I struggle with spending. Who likes to shop? Because it's definitely, my husband and I both struggle with spending. We are not good savers as much as we like to try and think we are. We're not. So those are, and when finances get in there and people are spending and, that comes with friction.
Yeah.
And we do really good at talking things out. I'm pretty laid back. He's more like high expectations. And I just heard this joke the other day, like, just take 30 seconds and lower your expectations and then walk into the situation. So like, that's a joke now that I have with him. But,
Instead
so
of, dude, you don't know me, it's dude,
just take a few minutes and lower those expectations.
Then we'll
Messy
talk.
house, kids acting out, just lower that. Yeah. I'm more laid back. I'm more like play before work. I'm more just kind of off the cuff, and he's more type A, I would say. So that gets some friction. We've had 2 miscarriages since having Sadie, so she's 4. So a couple years ago, we had 2 kind of back to back, and that was really, really difficult. However, I allowed myself 24 hours to have that dark, depressive type of mood, and then I was able to get out of it. But that's because we connected with people to do that. And I knew that coming out of the second miscarriage that this was not for us. Like we needed to and it was more me. I was obsessing about it. It was my life. I was peeing on sticks constantly. Like Matt's like, we should go and buy stock in this stuff. Like it just took over.
Yeah.
And sometimes I get like that where I get so into something that it almost takes over. And then I almost like drop it. And it's a weird pattern for me.
Trying to get pregnant, though, when you're walking through, whether it be infertility or just, again, expectation, I don't know anyone that doesn't become obsessive for, just because you're like, and the peeing on the stick, only when I was...
TMI, but it's true.
Oh, if you don't know that already, I'm sorry. This is how it works. But for Mercy, I thought the same thing. I'm like, I can't buy one more of these. Like, it's ridiculous how much money I'm spending on these pregnancy tests. Oh. So you made the decision, this is not for us.
Yeah, we were good with our 4. And her daughter's a handful. She may not be a handful here, but she's a handful. And we wanted, Matt was like, I don't want anybody to replace our baby girl. And even if we were to get pregnant again, like obviously we wouldn't have that thought, but we are very content with our 4. And one of the struggles too that I have is I have a teenager and a kid who's almost a teenager, and just maneuvering that whole thing. And am I a good enough mom? Do I have enough restrictions? Do I have giving them enough freedom? Like, what kind of conversations do I have? Like, you can read all the books in the world, but every kid's different, and it looks different for everybody. And so I think that is one of the biggest struggles right now, is especially with Matt as a stepdad. We have the support of their dad, obviously, but just maneuvering that blended family. We have done really good, I feel like, as a blended family, but it's always those conversations. And as they get a teenager, my son doesn't want me asking him any questions. And like, there's just those weird moments that, trying to work through and find my place as a parent with them is different than when they're 7 and 4 and they worship the ground you walk on. So it's a different phase, but it's a cool phase to watch them. But I think too, it's a struggle for us on how to balance all of that. So
parenting under the most ideal, and I don't even know what those ideal circumstances would be.
What does that even mean?
But of teenagers, I always think like with parenting, everything it's a journey. So you're layering on, which makes me respect so much people who adopt kids later on, because you kind of feel like it's a little bit of a joke, I feel like, because the moment you're like, okay, I think I have this figured out, something else shifts. So you're like newborn baby, whatever, and they're shifting, and all of a sudden they're mobile. Oh my goodness, they're moving. I got to figure this out. okay, I think I have that figured out. Like, oh, now we're vocal. Now we're like actually having to, so like mentally your energy starts to, so then it's like they go to school and then it's the elementary, what you said, then you're starting to deal with independence. Like, oh, they're away from me. And the whole joke, which I'm laughing, not laughing, because I'm a mom of 2 teenagers now, is I'm like, you finally get through what you feel like is like this, all these phases, and you're like, okay, they're independent, you know, all of these things. And then the joke is the hormones. Yeah. And then they're like, and now, like, cue hormones. No kidding. And then everything's out the window. Yeah. You're just like, okay, I used to say as a youth pastor, I would much rather be a youth pastor than a children's director. And it's half joke and half not. But hey, do what you're called to do, not when someone else is called to do. But I said part of it is because children's directors, I feel like, have way more ministry to deal with parents in terms of like it's a harder ministry. Because at that age, all the way up until teenagers, parents still think they know something. But by the time they become teenagers, and as a youth pastor, parents have basically been like, oh my goodness, somebody help me now. So I've been on the other side of this as a youth pastor, where you just feel like constant appreciation because you are dealing with parents who have now entered like, okay, cue hormones, help me. Everything I thought I knew is totally gone. Now the joke's on me. Now I'm the mom that's like, okay, now I get it, because there are, like you said, there aren't books. There are books, they just, neither kid is the same. It's a hot mess up in here, and you just don't, one day is never the same as the next. Right. It's insanity. Yeah. So you got one, how old is your oldest?
He'll be 14 next week.
Whew,
and then an almost 11 who acts like he's already texting girls. So yeah, that's a whole new, my oldest doesn't really. So that's a whole new world for me. Like, and he knows we read this text, like there's no getting around that, but it's like, oh, already, like, and part of me is like, well, what's in him that's making him want to seek that out right now? You know, I maybe I read too much into it because of my own stuff that I've gone through. Maybe it's just his personality. He's super social and he's super great kid. He doesn't get in trouble in school or anything, but it's like I can see him looking to other vices to fulfill things. And like, that's the road that I get scared on. Talk back to me all you want, but what vices are you going to go to God? Are you going to go to your parents? Or are you going to go to other things? And like, that's what I get the most afraid of.
Which makes sense, right? We bring our history. Right. And when that's the other thing teenagers do is they can hit nerves we forget are in us. Right. And then when they find that nerve, they, for some reason, find so much joy in their lives by jumping on it.
They do. Oh, yes, they do.
I feel like it's literally
it's like they're calling.
Yeah, it's true. The other day, I had this thought. I'm saying all this terrible. People are going to be like, we're never listening again. But I literally was driving, and I went through this thing. My kids are at the age too where we no longer tell our kids stories unless they give permission. One of my children, which will remain nameless, had said some kind of terrible things to me in a heated moment. And the things were basically verbatim what the voice inside my head pretty much already tells me every day. So they were along the lines of, you're the worst, you're a failure, you're a terrible mother, get a job, like all of these things. And, you know, you want to be strong because you're like, this is a teenager, they're just mad. But at the same time, you're like, yeah, tell me something that I'm not already telling myself. And I'm driving the car and I'm confessing this to a friend. Not confessing as in I've had sin, but I need to say this out loud that I'm like, girl, this is what he said. And I am just like reeling right now. And I had this moment where I was just like, my kids are at an age where they are like putty in the devil's hands. Yeah. I was like, not that my kids are the devil, but they do a lot of free service for him in my life right now. Like, I don't need other sources for lies. Right. Just listen to my teenagers tell me what they think about me in these moments. So yeah, I feel you. And PSA for all the moms of young kids, I feel like it's good for you to know hormones come sooner than 13. That was a shocker for me.
Yeah.
And you just mentioned you got a 10 turning 11. Teenager does not mean 13.
No.
So like, don't freak out when you're 8, 9, 10-year-old, all of a sudden you start seeing things that you're like, what is happening? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Cue hormones. And you're welcome for that public service announcement.
Very true.
Okay, so you got 4 kids. Obviously, life is busy. You're doing the journey. Being faithful every day as a mom of 4, obviously teenagers, blended family, you're married, all the things. What is your daily obedience, that daily faithfulness that kind of for you is that this is what's kind of keeping me on course to do the next right thing, right thing?
Yeah, my day, people say stay at home. Some people, probably not as much now, but stay-at-home moms kind of get a, oh, you don't do anything. And
only from people who don't know any.
No kidding. 4 kids, carting them everywhere. With ministry, with Life Church, between Celebrate Recovery Kids Life. I work from home for Safe Families and Rodan and Field. So I have a lot going on in my day. And a lot of it has nothing to do with me. It's all pouring into people, especially with Celebrate Recovery. Pour into people a lot of text messages, a lot of phone calls, a lot of just listening to people's stuff, right? And trying to help them in any way and to just give them a listening ear. So people ask me, like, how do you do it all? And I read this devotional in YouVersion called Margin. I highly recommend it. I think it's Craig Groeschel devotional. And it's just talking about what is your margin for the day. We all have the same hours, but if we aren't spending time with God and taking a breather for ourselves, then we're not going to have that margin. And I feel like I feel like not always do I get a devotional in there, like the quiet time that I want in the morning, but I do. I sit down. I don't actually like coffee, so I drink water. I drink Pepsi and Red Bull.
Water is better for you.
I don't drink it in the first thing in the morning. I drink water, and I just sit there with my bottle of water on the couch, and I try to do that before kids are up. So I'm just peaceful. It's just me and my dog. My husband's getting ready for work, and I just take that moment to pray. I do some deep, like I just breathe and just sit there and just like be still and know that I am God, right? So I start that because once my day starts, once we get into our phones and start getting into the emails and social media and so on, we get all over the place. And my kid's needing me every 2 seconds. So just trying, now I'm not perfect with this by any means, but trying to get up before the kids and just take, even if it's 10 minutes to breathe. I don't even make anything for myself to eat. I just really just breathe, pray, and jump on the book I'm reading, which is short devotionals, or YouVersion Bible app, and just read something, anything. There's verses of the day that you can get, like anything like that, and just pray on that. It doesn't have to be this long, drawn out process, but just something. And then at night, usually I joke with my husband, like, by the time dinner's done, I'm done. Like I don't do laundry. We'll do the dishes, but like I'm not doing housework. I'm not
preach.
Like I just need that time.
Yeah.
Because if you're go constantly and you don't take any type of break for yourself during the day, you're not good for anybody. And I feel like, self-care, it can be you can use it selfishly, but a little bit of self-care every day is not selfish. And I think the best self-care is to pray and read at least one Bible verse and just breathe that in and take that in. So that's kind of what the first of my day looks like. Like I said, it's not every single day, but discipline is something that I struggle with. But I did it today, and I try to do it pretty on the regular.
I love that that's so doable for people who are maybe like, I don't even know where to start, is like 10 minutes. Just set your alarm like 10 minutes earlier. And yeah, any of us, and then see what God does with that. Like commit to that and see where it goes from there.
Yeah.
Okay, there have been so many amazing moments. I couldn't even like pull it all together if I wanted, but I have gotten to ask you 1,000 trillion questions, and you've been so honest and open. So this is your opportunity as we wrap up. I give one question, so it's totally not fair. This is not even, I got to ask a million, you get one. But one question that I can answer for you today, what would your one question be?
Oh, well, part of me wants to ask something funny and embarrassing, but I don't really know what to ask. So I'm going to ask, from when we knew each other in Bible college, obviously that was a long time ago. Obviously, I assume that your views on Christianity or our walk with God may be a little bit different now that we're older and experienced life, right? And I know it is for me, and just what my relationship with God means and what it actually really means to be a Christian. And for me, it was all about works before, and you're never going to arrive, right? So I guess my question for you is, what has changed in your views from back when we went to Bible college to now? Like,
that is so good. And I'm like so many things. I feel like if I really give it a second thought, some of them may all fall into a very similar bucket. I think all the way up to Bible school and for some years after that, I falsely believed that if I kept doing the right things and choosing the right things, that good would come. Like, and it's like this weak prosperity gospel. I wasn't like, oh, I'll get rich but I thought if I obey God, then basically I'm going to walk in blessing, like good things will come. And that everything that God had in store for me was going to be good, like in one way or the other, that this is going to be good. And what life and God has revealed along the way is that sometimes, even when I'm walking in obedience and when I'm following Him, that a broken world, in a broken system, in my own broken self, that I cannot escape suffering by my obedience. That suffering is part of the journey that God has, like that is part of it. And honestly, that I don't want to miss it, that God, like I'm going to miss part of God's story if I don't embrace and walk that part of it. I definitely entered Bible school with that legalistic, like, if I do this, this will happen. Life is an equation. God has blown that out in all of the best and hardest ways. And even though our stories are not the same in terms of, I didn't necessarily walk the same things as you, I feel like we have learned a lot of the same things on different paths, which is, life is not an equation. That's not how this works. And I need God's grace and redemption and forgiveness every single day. That was a really good question. That was my favorite so far, and that was really hard. This has been awesome. Erin, thank you so much for sharing your story.
Thanks for asking me.
What an incredible story. I am so thankful that Erin was willing to come on and just to be so open and vulnerable about her story. I hope that this was a huge encouragement to you, whether there are parts of her story that resonated with you, maybe things that you have walked similar roads, or maybe your story looks very different, but like me, you needed this reminder of the power of God's redemption and how He can take things, anything in our life that the enemy could easily use to defeat us or destroy us. And when we give it to Him, when we surrender to Him, how He can use these things for our good and for His glory. And man, what a testimony Erin's life is right now to just the work that God has done in so many arenas. Girls, if you want to reach out, you want to connect with Erin, even maybe just to send her a note to like, hey, thanks for sharing your story. You can find her on Instagram at Erin Burr. You can find her on Facebook at Erin Doncaster Burr. I would encourage you to send her a note, just a note of encouragement, a thank you, whatever it is. We would love to hear from you at Hey Girl Pod on our Facebook or Instagram on just how God has used this story. And I feel like I need to say, for those of you who are listening, even if it's just one of you who's listening, who maybe part of her story is something that is very real for you. I know we talked about abuse. We've talked about, issues of addiction, I thought it was so powerful when Erin talked through kind of some of those transitions of, I believe she talked in one relationship about how, you're in a relationship and all of a sudden you're letting someone call you a name that you would have never thought you would let someone call you. And whatever that looks like, if you find yourself in a relationship that is not a safe relationship, it's not a healthy one, maybe there's abuse, maybe there's addiction, whatever it is, I just want to encourage you to reach out and talk to somebody. Find someone. I was just amazed at Erin's story and the community of people that were around her. I also know that there are those who may feel isolated, like they're just not sure where to turn. I want to say, find someone. Maybe it's a church nearby, a pastor, someone, a safe person that you can talk to, and know that you're not alone and that God is with you. He's not waiting for you to figure it out and get to the other side, that He is with you now, that He wants to walk with you into healing, into freedom, into restoration. And so, girls, this episode, was a doozy. It was powerful. I was so moved. The rest of the day after talking to Erin, this really is something I've continued to process, and I'm excited to see what God's going to keep doing in Erin's life, in her family. And so we'd love to hear from you. I'm praying for you, whoever you are, wherever you are this week listening, wherever God has you, sister, friend. I am praying that you would be encouraged today to just keep running your race in your place wherever God has you, and know that we are cheering you on.